Hey everyone, it's Greg here, and today I want to discuss something that I think is kind of interesting that happened to me. So a bit ago, I gave a speech in front of about 400 SEOs talking about the difference between running an affiliate business and an e-commerce business, and how the reward can often be far greater for you if you're running an e-commerce business in terms of the payout, there's the business model, a lot more safety, you're able to do multi-channel marketing. And one of the things I got, an old friend of mine, he messaged me on LinkedIn because he saw one of my slides and he mentioned like, oh my God, you are so right. I have been building all these affiliate sites when I should have been building e-commerce stores. But you know, I'm so busy right now with client work at my agency, I feel like I'm never going to build an asset. So my friend here, he thought, or at least he was underneath the impression that because he is focused on his agency, he isn't necessarily building a value as asset. I think this is really interesting. I thought it was worthwhile to talk about a video because agencies are actually extremely sellable if you do it right. In fact, we have sold agencies, 7-figure agencies, multiple 6-figure agencies, and we're hoping to sell a 8-figure agency one day. I think marketing agencies are a fantastic asset and they are definitely sellable as long as you do it right. Now, this conviction that you just can't sell an agency, I think is eerily similar to back in 2016, how people thought you couldn't sell affiliate sites, you couldn't sell Amazon FBA stores. So let's clear up the whole thing and bring some good news out there to my agency friends. If you are building a marketing agency and you want to have a big 6-figure, 7-figure, or even an 8-figure exit, then this video is for you. All right, before we go into what makes an agency sellable, the first thing we got to do is address the question why this mindset even exists as to why agencies can't be sold at all. So what are some of the things that traditionally happen in a marketing agency? I shouldn't say traditionally, but happens to a lot of marketing agencies that do make them unsellable. Because there are a few points here that we need to clear up. And if you plan on selling your agency, you need to make sure that these things aren't happening in your business. So the very first thing is owner-dependent operations. What I mean by this is, are you doing everything? You as the owner of the marketing agency, are you getting on the sales calls, closing the clients, fulfilling for the clients, doing HR, bookkeeping, all that kind of stuff? If you are so owner-dependent where everything of the operation relies upon you, then yeah, you probably can't sell your agency. Buyers don't want to buy a job, they want to buy a business. And a business is inherently, at least one that's sellable, is a system of cash flow. And if you are the only person doing everything, then you have not really built an asset. Now, this isn't true in all cases. You can sell an agency if you are owner dependent, but it's just way, way harder. So the mantra I try to teach people when it comes to selling their business, and this goes for every business model really, not just agencies, but it's especially relevant, I feel, with agencies, is the mantra of how can I become more useless to my business? Like if you aren't required for the maintenance and the growth, like especially the growth of your business, this is a very good sign because that means you have built a system in your business that doesn't require your input. And that makes it much more attractive to a buyer. Now we're going to come back to this idea a little bit throughout this video because honestly, this is one of the things that I feel like plagues agencies a lot and kind of bleeds into some of the other areas that makes it hard to sell an agency. Next is inconsistent revenue stream. So I've talked to a few agency owners over the last few months, and there's one common question that they keep asking, which I thought was quite interesting, so I will bring it up here. And they ask like, how long should my contracts be with my clients to make sure I get a better valuation? Is it 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? Like how long should I be, chaining my client to my service in the contract? And my answer might surprise you. It certainly surprised the other agency owners. Now, there could be difference of opinion here, but in terms of my view, when it comes to selling an agency, contracts really don't matter. Like contracts, they only give you like a 50% chance to win in a legal battle, and that's if you have a good contract. And also the contract to uphold it, to pursue the actual legal fees of pursuing down someone who's broken that contract, often way eclipse the actual revenue from that contract. Like if you're trying to pursue a plumber that is paying you $1,000 a month and he stops paying you and you have a 12-month contract, whatever, the amount of legal fees you're going to do and the amount of just time spent to try to get that, claw back that $1,000 a month from that client is often going to be way, way more than the actual revenue that the contract represents. So while contracts are good, they are nice, they're nice to have, they're really not a need to have. In fact, some of the best agencies we've ever sold have no contract at all. They had an a la carte service where you choose what you wanted every single month, And some people paid every single month, some people didn't. Some people paid 1 month and they came back a few months later and used the service for another thing, right? So contracts aren't as important as you might think. Now, what is actually important when it comes to your revenue to create that consistency that buyers like is your churn. How long are your clients actually staying with your business? If you're like a lot of agencies, you might be really good at sales, but really bad at retention. So you might get a customer who pays you $1,000 a month for 2-3 months, but then they're gone and they never come back. This is bad. What you want to shoot for is about 97% retention in your clients. And ideally, the lifetime value, the full value of a client should be around 18 months or higher. If you can get a client to stay with you for 18 months or longer, and the majority of your clients are like that, this is a really good sign, because not only is it showing that your fulfillment is working, but your retention is working. Because we all know, like, you could be the best marketer under the sun that's driving crazy results for your client, and if you don't have good retention systems, the client is going to start looking at the grass on the other side of the fence, even though you're performing for him. So what this tells a buyer is not only are clients sticking around, so they must be getting results of some kind, but that the agency is actually proficient at retaining those clients. And usually there's a bunch of different kinds of retention systems you can put into your agency, from simple monthly gifts to weekly reports, all that kind of over communication, kind of hospitality that you can do to keep the client with you longer. So ideally, you want to shoot for a very low churn rate and a very high LTV. 18 months and up is considered kind of the gold standard. Now, does that mean you need to have that? No, you can sell an agency with less than an 18-month LTV. It's just harder. Like, if you could prove that clients stick around like, a year and a half plus with you, this is all really, really good, that you have a very good system, which inherently makes it more attractive to a buyer. And third, again, this is not like agency specific. This is just all business models, but poor financial record keeping. Like, it happens to the best of us. We're busy. Honestly, if you want to sell your agency, even if you don't want to sell your agency, you should hire a professional bookkeeper. Like, you should not be doing it yourself. Like, I know me, I'm pretty bad with numbers and spreadsheets, to be honest, but I have people at EF in the organization that helps me. That's a very strong weakness of mine when it comes to spreadsheets. So it pays tons of dividends for you just to take that off of your plate and get that organized for you on an ongoing basis. So I recommend good financial records. And the other thing when it comes to selling a business, and again, this is all business types, is don't do cash basis accounting when you go to sell. Like, cash basis accounting is all right to kind of feel where you're at with your business. So it's okay to run it that way. But when it comes to selling it, I would highly recommend accrual accounting. So accrual accounting is where the expense is locked with the value when the value is created. So if you, sponsor a conference, the actual expense of that conference isn't put into the books until the moment that the value is supposed to be received. So after the conference, for example. This is, again, why you should hire a professional, because most people aren't really set up to figure out, like, how do I do this? But bookkeepers can help you with this. It's actually pretty simple for them. They'll probably have to ask you a few questions and you would answer and you're done. Now, if you go to sell your business with us, we actually do this for you on your behalf. So if you don't have it already and you want to sell your business, don't worry, the Empire can take care of you, right? All right, so we talked about 3 things that makes your agency more unsellable. Let's talk about how you can actually turn this around and make your agency a very, very sellable business. Because like I said, there is actually quite a large buyer demand for marketing agencies. It's just that most marketing agencies kind of suck. So that's honestly why most of them don't get to be sold. So let's talk about what you can do to put yourself in such a great position that buyers might start tripping over themselves to give you $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $5 million for that ultra profitable agency you built. So first step is to systemize everything. Agencies, more so than almost any other business model, really do rely on systems and talent. The buyer is buying your system and the people you set up to run and execute that system. So you need very clearly defined processes, from client acquisition to client fulfillment to retention. Everything should be outlined. Now, the SOP test, the sniff test, I call it, that you can do, and this again is for any business model, but I think especially important for agencies, is ask yourself, if you gave someone who has no knowledge of how to run a marketing agency, no knowledge of the niche you serve or the service you fulfill, if you just gave them your SOPs, how confident are you that they can run your entire business about 80% as well as you. Now, obviously they can't do 100% probably because there's all the nuance and stuff like that, but they should be able to read your SOPs and pretty clearly run the business decently well. And if you think, well, I don't think that's very likely, then you have a problem inherent in your own system. So you need to tease that out and you need to clarify in your SOPs to do as best as you can to get to that 80% thing, where if someone reads your SOPs, they're able to just kind of keep the ball running. Next is diversifying your client base. So this happens especially with younger agencies that are kind of newer to the game, where they might have, 20, 30 clients, but really they only have one client, because one client represents like 80% of their entire monthly cash flow, and they are terrified every night of losing this single client. This is what I mean by diversity of revenue. It's very important in agencies especially. Usually I say like no one product should make up like 50% of your revenue. With agencies, I would go down even further, where no one client makes up 40% of your revenue. You really want to have a good diversified base. And you'd argue it could even be made that 40% is too high with agencies, just because like the blow of losing that kind of client is not like with an e-commerce store where you can pop up a new ad, pop up a new product, but you got to go find another whale client, right? Like that's not a super easy thing to replace for most people at least. So you really want to diversify your client base by having multiple clients with no one making up the lion's share. Now, a fun quick story, Empire Flippers, when we first began, we were actually basically a Filipino outsourcing company for companies in the USA. And this is exactly what birthed Empire Flippers. We had one client that made up the vast majority of our revenue. And for whatever reason, they decided to stop paying us. And now we had a whole team. Like, well, how are we going to support our team? So we had them building out little AdSense websites and then flipping them. And that was the whole birth incarnation of Empire Flippers. We actually started off more or less as an agency. So this is what I mean. Like most people probably don't have it in them to do what we did. That was quite the grind for obvious reasons. But for you'll sleep better at night, even if you don't sell your agency, if no one client makes up over 40% of your revenue, and buyers will be much more attracted to you because there's way less risk. If one client goes away, like, yeah, that sucks, but it's not the end of the world kind of cataclysm. Next is team leadership. So this is another issue agencies really run into. Like I said, a buyer is buying your systems and the people you have hired and trained to implement those systems. So if you don't have a very good team, you may not have a very good agency to sell, because talent is one of the big acquisitions that buyers want when they acquire an agency. Now, there's a twofold problem here when it comes to talent with agencies. Like, good talent will probably one day want to leave and start their own agency. It's kind of a vicious cycle. We're like, oh, I could run my own agency so much better than this guy. Then they go and do it, and their second command is like, I can run the agency so much better than this guy. It is a great circle of people starting agencies or left their previous agency, right? So when it comes to your talent bench, most small businesses have a very thin talent bench. And what I mean by that is if one person leaves, there's often no one that can replace that person. There's no one that knows what to do that this person knew how to do. So for you as an agency owner, there's a couple things you want to do here when it comes to your employees and your team. One, you should cross-train as much of your team as possible. Now, I'm not saying that your customer service should be the killer on the sales calls, but they should know at least how to do one. So in case you run into an issue where your entire sales team gets up and leaves for whatever reason, this stuff happens. So now, like, while you're looking to bring in that new salesperson, at least you can have a band-aid over the situation while you try to fix the wound completely, right? The other thing to think about here when it comes to your talent bench outside of cross-training is having redundancies if you can afford it. If your net worth is good enough, your cash flow is good enough, then I do recommend hiring like two people for the same role. Like, that might seem like overkill. Like, you can make one person where half of their job is the other role and half their job is something else. But by doing it this way, if one person leaves the team, you're going to be okay. And speaking of the team, probably the most important part of the team is having leadership in place. Because if you are trying to build a business where you are useless, where you don't really have to contribute to the growth of the business anymore, which should be the end goal, then that also means you need to have a good leadership team. That means you need to have good managers, good directors, team leads, all that kind of stuff in your agency. Now, you don't have to have a super complex organization to achieve this, but you should have enough people managing the different departments where that is their sole focus and you don't really have to focus there. And this is all great signs for a buyer looking at your business. And speaking of that, your directors or your management, or whatever you call them, they should have people that are kind of sitting on the talent bench that they think would be a good replacement for them if they ever left. Or at least you should have a short list of those names who are the other leaders inside of your little pods, your departments. So that way, if something did happen, there's someone you can kind of lean on. And this is, again, just managing your talent and the system. And these are two very, very important things that often don't get done very well in an agency. Second to the last thing is productizing your service. So one of the issues that agencies run into, and this goes back to the owner operator, like fulfilling everything. Like maybe you have someone like, for example, me, I'm ultra mega creative kind of guy, and I can bring ideas because I'm thinking out of left field all the time with something. And let's say I run a creative agency and then I want to sell that creative agency. But if I'm doing custom creative work for every one of my clients, that relies heavily on me unless I can find another like weird creative that can kind of match what I would do, right? And it's very, very hard to create an assembly line of service fulfillment if all of your work is bespoke and customized to the end client. Now, there are a few cases where this works, but only if your clients are extremely high end. Like I'm talking about paying you 50, 100 grand a month kind of high end, then okay, we can probably find more creative people at this kind of margin. But when it comes to selling your agency, I heavily lean on productized services. How can you take your SEO service, your Facebook ad service, whatever, and turn it into an assembly line where it kind of feels almost like an e-commerce purchase versus a customized service? And this allows you to do a few things. One, you can scale a lot easier. It's much cleaner on what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable. The deliverables are extremely clear because you're telling the client upfront, this is what I do, and I don't do anything else. This is the price. This is what I do, blah, blah, blah. And you become very, very good at that very specific thing. Like I have friends who could probably do local SEO in their sleep because they've done it so many times over and over and over again that it is a well-worn path. They just know what needs to be done in what order, right? And that will happen to you too if you move away from custom work and you focus on productizing your service where you have a very specific type of deliverable you're doing over and over again. Now, you might still have multiple services you're doing, and maybe the assembly line concept comes from the niche you serve rather than the service you offer. But I recommend to do both. Like you should have one niche you know really, really well, one service you know really, really well, and you can expand to other niches and other services, but you really should dial in those two things before you do, in my opinion. Final thing when it comes to selling an agency, and this could be one of the most important ones because I don't see a lot of agencies actually doing this. And the most successful agencies when it comes to exiting an agency, they pretty much all do this in my view, including the ones we've sold. So that comes down to your client acquisition system. How are you actually getting clients to sign up for your agency? Now, with most agencies, the answer is the bane of every marketer's existence, where they say referrals. Like, oh, we don't do any marketing ourselves. It's just all word of mouth. Like, how often as an agency owner have you heard a small business owner say something similar to you and you just groan? Because this is a strategy of hope. There's like, that's great. It means like you are at least offering something that is good that people like, so they like are referring people to you. That's fantastic, but it's ultimately a strategy of hope because you can't really control that. You can do things to kind of induce more referrals, if you will, but you can't really control that acquisition system. So when it comes to your agency, I highly recommend that you have some kind of marketing funnel where you're eating your own dog food to generate your own clients. Now, this could be cold email, this could be SEO, this could be Facebook ads, and all of it attached to some kind of funnel like a VSL or a sales call, whatever. Now, when it comes to doing this really, really well, when you first start off, it will probably be you because you don't have any resources, right? Everything's basically you. But later on, as you get closer to, say, a 7-figure exit, which for an agency owner, you have to be making around $35,000 to $40,000 net profit per month for that. You should be taken out of that process completely. Like in the beginning, if it was you running the ads, like in terms of like your own face on a video or a picture or whatever, get someone else from your team to become that face, to slowly take you out of the equation where your face is no longer associated with the business. So again, you don't run into the owner dependent problem. And that way you can show the buyer, look, like we are generating all these leads from our lead form ads and they're converting at this percentage. and I don't do anything. Like my sales team does it, my customer service team does it, or my marketing nurturing does it, right? Where they convert to the actual client. So this can be scaled as much as you want. Here's how we do it, blah, blah, blah. And the more of these client acquisition systems you have, the more attractive the business really becomes, because it's a system. It's not built on hope. So those are the main takeaways when it comes to selling an agency. So marketing agencies in general, when done right, are some of the best business models out there to sell, because you have built a great system, usually solid margins. So the margins you want to shoot for your agency is going to be between 15 to 20%. Anything above 15%, if you're a 7-figure and up agency, is usually pretty good. Even 10 to 15% is acceptable, though that's more red flag territory. Like maybe you're cutting it too close to the grind. But in general, if you can build out an agency like how I just described, where you have a good team, good workbench, good systems, and an acquisition system for your clients, as well as proven fulfillment, you are sitting pretty. There are a lot of buyers that want to buy you. So don't be like my friend where you think, oh, this is going to be impossible for me to ever get a life-changing exit because I'm so busy with this agency I built. Your agency can be the ticket for your life-changing exit. And if you want to find out how much your agency is worth, then check out our valuation tool. It's linked down below. Or you can go to empireflippers.com/valuation-tool and you'll get a free valuation. Just click on service as your business model. And that is based on 2,000 transactions we have done. So it's using real sales data of real businesses we sold on the marketplace. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Got a lot of value out of it. I'll see you in the next one.